We all wonder about it, don't we? It is the oldest question: what happens after we die? This question has echoed through human history. It touches every single one of us. Different cultures and religions offer different answers. Some speak of rebirth, others of an endless sleep. Christianity offers a message of hope. It suggests that life doesn't just end with our last breath. There is something more that awaits each soul on its journey. The Christian faith speaks of an afterlife. It tells us that our spirit, our soul, continues to exist. Physical death is not the absolute end. It is more like a doorway, a transition. Think of it as moving from one room to another. The body may stay behind, but the essence of who we are moves on. This belief in a continuing existence is central. It shapes how many approach life and death itself. It brings comfort to many facing loss. Now, where does the soul go? According to some Christian teachings, it is not the same for everyone. The path taken after death can depend on the life lived. It depends on the choices made and on faith. This idea introduces different destinations in the afterlife. It suggests a separation based on one's relationship with God. These are not always simple ideas. They involve places of comfort and places of waiting. Understanding these helps us see the bigger picture. Before the time of Jesus Christ, the understanding was a bit different. The Old Testament scriptures hinted at what was to come. People still passed from this life into another state. Two specific concepts from that time are Abraham's bosom and Hades. These terms describe the realms of the dead. They were seen as holding places for souls. They existed before Christ's resurrection changed things forever. Let us explore these ancient concepts. So, what exactly is Abraham's bosom? Imagine a place of serene comfort. It is a place of peace and rest. This term comes from Jewish tradition and is mentioned in the New Testament. It was understood as a special place. It was for the righteous souls who died before Jesus completed his work. Think of it as a gentle haven for those who lived faithfully. They were waiting for God's full plan to unfold. It was a place where good people found solace. Who went to Abraham's bosom? It was for those who honored God. These were people who followed his ways as they understood them. This includes figures from the Old Testament. Think of prophets and faithful men and women. They trusted in God's promises even before Jesus came. They lived lives that reflected their devotion. They were considered righteous in God's eyes. Abraham himself, a key figure of faith, is associated with this place of rest. The Gospel of Luke gives us a vivid picture. It tells the story of a poor, righteous man named Lazarus. When Lazarus died, he was carried by angels to Abraham's bosom. There he found comfort after a life of suffering. He was welcomed into this place of peace. He rested in the presence of Abraham. This story helps us understand it as a positive destination. It was a reward for a life lived in faith and patience. It contrasted sharply with other fates. Abraham's bosom was seen as a temporary state of bliss. It was a comforting hope for those awaiting the Messiah. It was not the final heaven as understood later, but it was a place of closeness to God's presence. It was a place free from pain and sorrow. The souls there were in a state of peaceful expectation. They anticipated the ultimate redemption that was to come. It was a promise of God's care even after death. Now let us talk about Hades. What is this place? In simple terms, Hades is the realm of the dead. It is a Greek word often used in the New Testament. It is somewhat similar to the Hebrew concept of Sheol. It was generally understood as the place where all spirits went after death. However, it was not a uniform place for everyone. Within Hades, there seemed to be different conditions. It was a kind of holding place for souls who went to Hades. Generally, it was seen as the destination for those who were not righteous. This included those who did not follow God's ways, or perhaps those who lived lives apart from him went there. It wasn't necessarily the fiery hell often depicted in popular culture. And that final place of punishment is usually called Gehenna. Hades was more of an intermediate state. It was a place of waiting before the final judgment for some. For others, it was a place of discomfort. Let's return to the story of Lazarus. There was also a rich man in that story. He had lived a life of luxury, ignoring the needy Lazarus. When the rich man died, he found himself in Hades, and he was in torment. He could see Lazarus far off in Abraham's bosom, but he could not reach him. This part of the story shows Hades as a place of suffering. It was a place of regret and separation from God's comfort. His experience was one of anguish. It is important to understand that Hades in this context is not the eternal hell. It's often seen as a temporary realm. Souls there awaited the final judgment. For some, it was a place of conscious suffering or awareness of their separation. The New Testament indicates that Jesus, after his death, descended into Hades. But he did not remain there. His resurrection conquered death and Hades. This paved a new way for believers. So we have Abraham's bosom and Hades. They represent two very different experiences after death. Abraham's bosom was a place of comfort, closeness, and peace. It was for the righteous who were resting in God's care. Hades, particularly for the unrighteous like the rich man, was a place of torment. It was a place of awareness of one's separation from that comfort. The contrast is stark, one a haven, the other a place of distress. They were distinct realities. The story of Lazarus and the rich man highlights this separation. It speaks of a great chasm fixed between Abraham's bosom and Hades. This chasm was so vast that no one could cross from one side to the other. This imagery emphasizes the profound difference in destinies. It shows that the conditions in these two places were fixed. Those in comfort could not alleviate the suffering of those in torment, and those in torment could not reach the place of peace. Christian belief holds that Jesus Christ's death and resurrection changed everything. He conquered death and Hades. For those who believe in him, the promise is now direct access to heaven. Heaven is seen as being in the very presence of God. This is a place of eternal joy and communion with him. So Abraham's bosom and Hades primarily describe the state of the departed before Christ's ultimate victory. They were part of an older understanding. In summary, Abraham's bosom was a paradise for the faithful departed before Christ. Hades was the general realm of the dead, with torment for the unrighteous. These concepts help us understand the journey of the soul. However, it is good to remember that beliefs about the afterlife can differ. Different Christian traditions may interpret these ideas in various ways. The core message remains one of hope and God's ultimate justice and mercy. The journey of faith continues to explore these profound mysteries.